Calling planet Earth. Calling planet Earth. Hey, Sun Ra people. Those of Earth and other worlds. Christopher Sun Ra Archive. Hopping on for another quick live stream today. We've been talking about the poetry in some of the live streams, and I had mentioned that I should really bring all my Sun Ra books together and set up a bookshelf next to the computer here so I have reference at easy recall. And I'm going to start doing that. But I thought while I was doing that, it would be fun to do a Sun Ra bookshelf video as I load it up. They're kind of all in different spots depending on how big they are. So I'm going to set up a bookshelf here and put all the Sun Ra in one location so we have them to refer to when we are talking here. So the YouTube mantra: like, subscribe, share, set up notifications so you can see when I'm going live. Please see if we can get any traction for this, if we want to keep doing it or not. But so the Sun Ra bookshelf, the first Sun Ra book I probably bought was John Swed, Space is the Place, when it came out. And since then, I've tried to get every book that I can. I'm sure that there are some that have fallen through the cracks, but as I load up the bookshelf up here and kind of pull them out from throughout where they're stored, I'm going to do a couple videos here and just walk through it. So the latest book release, Sun Ra Art on Saturn, published by Fantagraphics by Erwin Chusad and Chris Reisman, the album cover art of Sun Ra's Saturn label. This is a must-have. Oversized, hardcover, beautifully printed, really nice paper, a true art book, somewhere in the 12 by 12 inches, 13 by 13 inches range. Cover price, $75. You know, money's tight, and that seems probably like a lot, but don't think twice about it. Save your coffee money and get this while you can. Who knows how long it'll be in print, but this is a beautiful book and a must-have for a Sun Ra fan. Not just from a music standpoint, but from a graphic design and art standpoint. It's gorgeous and so well done from a production standpoint. So the photography, hi Magnolia, the photography, the scans, the comprehensiveness of this book is not to be missed. I'm looking for one good page to show you. So, it presents a lot of the album covers, kind of as they are, unadulterated. There is some text, a couple introductory essays, etc., but it's mostly photographs, but presented in a large scale and just a feast for the eyes. So, Sun Ra Art on Saturn. First book that's going in the Sun Ra bookshelf. Oversized. Beautiful. Order it from Amazon or Fantagraphics or whatever fine book retailer you get books from as soon as you possibly can. Who knows how long it'll be around for, and you will regret it if you don't have it. Maggie says hi. Black Sky Blue Moon, one of her favorite Sun Ra songs ever, Just Like Me, recorded 1958, Chicago, Illinois. Maggie's my co-pilot in all things work-wise, computer-wise. She's on pretty much every meeting that I ever do here at this computer, and she wants to get involved in the Sun Ra books too. All right, book number 2 for the Sun Ra bookshelf is Omniverse Sun Ra, Hartmut Gierken, Bernard Heffel. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing both of those, and forgive me. Wait a Wild Press. So if we think relatively about the $75 price for the Sun Ra Art on Saturn book, when Hartmut originally printed this book by mail order only around 1995, I remember it being $100, and I was a college student at the time, and that was pretty much my budget for a month or two. So there's no way I could afford this when it came out. That was $100, 25 years ago. So $75 for the Sun Ra Saturn book, relatively is a great deal. So this book originally came out private press, professionally printed by Hartmut. Again, kind of like a 12 by 12, 13 by 13 inch album size book. And this was the first and greatest kind of all-encompassing Sun Ra book, containing texts, the Val Wilmer pictures that are so well known, Sun Ra's astrology, an overview of the album covers at the time, a discography. I think this is around the same time as the first earthly recordings of Sun Ra came out by Robert Camel, and we'll see that at some point. But just a beautiful book. I don't know how many of these Hartmut printed, what the run was. They were around for a couple years. You could still order copies from him in the mail. But once it went out of print, he originally had said, and he stuck by this for a long time, that it would never be reprinted. But it was many, many years later by Art Yard, and revised with the original is beautiful and a nice thing to have. And I will say I'm very grateful to have it, because I couldn't afford it when it came out. But my friend Richard Segan, my Sun Ra mentor, when he moved to Hawaii from Connecticut, he couldn't take any of his books. And he gave me his Sun Ra books. So I'm forever grateful. And now that Richard's traveling the spaceways, it means a lot to have that of his. Many great memories looking at that at his house. I mean, it was like a relic, like an artifact. So here we go. Omniverse Sun Ra, the revised version by Gierken and Trent. This was put out by Art Yard, hardcover, professionally printed, beautiful. This came out. So if the original Omniverse was 1995, Art Yard put this out in 2015. So 20 years after Hartmut said it was not going to be reprinted. And it's similar. It's an update of the original Omniverse with some new material, an updated discography, some additional photographs from Hartmut of Sun Ra in Egypt, but a really great way to get this book back in print. So, discography, album covers, etc. What did this retail for? I think this was also in the kind of $75 to $100 range when it was released. I believe it's out of print now. There's no price on it. Maybe check Art Yard Records, Dusty Groove, something like that. Pick up a copy, but one of the two versions of Omniverse you got to have. That'll be the third book on the Sun Ra shelf. Coming in at number 4, Sun Ra, Space is the Place, hardcover. The The 40th anniversary edition of Spaces the Plays contains both known versions of the film, commentary, and a CD of the soundtrack. This was put out by Heart Books. Let's see the release date, 40th anniversary edition, 2014. Heart Recording, San Francisco. A printing of 3,000 copies. Animal hair everywhere. There are some essays from the filmmakers of Spaces the Place, and a lot of the photographs that you're familiar with from the production and the film, including these beautiful John Gilmore portraits. Gilmore is a mummy or a pharaoh, ancient Egyptian. This is long out of print as far as I'm aware. It included a CD as well as a DVD of the film. I think it was between $40 and $60 at the time, which was a steal, really, in retrospect. Sun Ra, Spaces the Place, 40th anniversary. All right. Up next in the Sun Ra bookshelf, The Face of Black Music, photos by Valerie Wilmer. Softcover, Da Capo Press. Valerie did the photographs. If you saw them, you would know exactly what they are. Very well-known Sun Ra photographs that are in Omniverse Sun Ra, and they're included in a lot of the reissues, etc. But this is a collected photography book of her jazz and blues type portraits. The Jazz Cookbook. Here's a cool one. Again, this and the Valerie Wilmer, as well as Omniverse, were gifted to me by Richard Segan from his collection. The Jazz Cooks. Stuart Tabori and Chang is the publisher. This came out in the 80s or 90s. Let's see what's in here. Richard's got a chocolate cookie recipe in the front cover, which, if you know Richard, will make you chuckle, because Richard loved his cookies and his chocolate. But the cool thing about this book, and luckily I have it bookmarked. Where is it? Is Sun Ra's infamous moon stew recipe. Sun Ra's recipe for moon stew, which you will all know as referred to in lots of the Arkestra stories and John Sweat's Spaces the Place book, how Sun Ra would make this kind of improvised basic ingredient moon stew to nourish the band at rehearsals and at home with whatever produce and ingredients were around at the time. But the recipe made this book, Sun Ra's Moon Stew. And I haven't seen that anywhere else online. I've searched for it, the recipe. I've never made it, and I should. Okay. J.E., thank you for hosting these streams. They've been wonderful. J.E., thank you. Thanks for participating. Glad you've enjoyed them. Thanks for being here. Please like, subscribe, join in the chat, tell your friends. Let me know what you're enjoying, what you want to talk about. And this is as much about all of us and you as it is about me. I'm in a Sun Ra, part of my lifelong Sun Ra orbit. I'm very close in my rotation right now. So I wanted to document it with some live streams and see if we can get some conversation going. But I'm putting together my Sun Ra bookshelf, gathering all the books that are around the house and packed away and stuff and getting them on the shelf here. So as we have these talks, we can refer to them. So J.E., welcome. Thank you. All right, we're going to get into photocopies and binders here. And I'm going to try, and I'm already 15 minutes of the way through, and I've got another stack to go through. I'm not going to do them all at once, but this is what I've pulled together today. But we're going to get into what was one of my earliest inspirations as far as thinking, not just that I was going to be a Sun Ra researcher, but that I was going to try and share the journey, is the Heinz brothers, John and Peter, and Sun Ra Research. They were my kind of biggest main influence. They put out Sun Ra Research magazine, which was based on the interviews that they conducted in person with Sun Ra and the Arkestra in their time together. They transcribed those audio tape interviews and put them out in a fanzine / magazine, throughout the 90s, roughly. I'm not sure, but we'll have to look when we get to them, when the first one came out. But I believe that the Heinz brothers in their day-to-day 9 to 5 were involved in the printing industry in some fashion and may have used that connection to do these self-published, really very funnily, if that's a word, printed compendiums of transcriptions of their interviews, interviews from jazz magazines, clippings from newspapers, concert reviews, etc. And they had the fanzine, Sun Ra Research, they put out. And I have those elsewhere. They'll be on another episode. But they put out these books, which is essentially 8.5 by 11 photocopies, comb bound together. And in the early 2000s, they did a handful of them. And they're going to be the next thing on the Sun Ra bookshelf. So they're kind of, the printing quality appears to be both photocopy and very simple offset or screen printing, one color printing. And they did it really creatively in a way that they would use probably different remnant stocks or, different types of colors of paper. So it kind of has a scrapbook feel. It has a handmade feel, even though it's professionally printed. And when you see them all together, I think that there's some kind of element of improvisation and randomness to these, meaning that my copy, this Give Me the Simple Life chart might be on white paper. Maybe someone else's version, it's on a different kind of paper. And then they bound them together. But you kind of get this cool effect where, like, this picture of Sun Ra is on a translucent kind of rice paper, parchment paper. And then another version of it on white paper. So they're clearly made with love, and you hold them and look at them and you feel that love and that passion and that respect. So Sun Ra book 2003. So the next book that's going on the shelf, Sun Ra book 2001 from the Heinz brothers, Sun Ra Research. This one's about double the size of 2003. Similar idea, collecting together like a Downbeat article from Downbeat magazine, just all of their collected research and documents in addition to their interviews. This really inspired me. Not just that they were doing it, but they were documenting it and they were sharing it, and they put the next stone in the path for someone like me who came after them. They made it easier for me by sharing their research. And that's what I've always tried to do, and take a cue from them, that in and of themselves, these photocopies of the cover of the Immeasurable Equation or a John Gilmore article might not be a huge piece of the puzzle or the story, but when you collect them together and present them in this way and put them all side by side year after year, it's a great repository of information. And I'm so thankful that I was able to buy these when they were available. I'm sure they're long gone. Sun Ra Book 2000 by John and Peter Hines, Sun Ra Research. The exact same idea. And they did these for a few years in the early 2000s. This same idea, John Reed article. But just, so great. And this was the first place that I saw like that very early 1950s portrait of the band where they're wearing the leopard skin and fezzes and hats, studio portrait. Probably one of my favorite earliest pictures of the band. Somehow they had de-archived that. So this is the next one on the bookshelf, Sun Ra Book 2000. Sun Ra Book 2000. This is another volume of it. I can't remember the methodology that they use, why there's two versions of 2000, but they are totally different. I don't know if it's a volume 1 or a volume 2. But John and Peter, thank you eternally for everything that you've done. You have my gratitude and my respect, and you've been a huge inspiration for me, huge shining light for me. Love these. Sun Ra Book 2000, the next one on the Sun Ra shelf. Immeasurable equation. So this was a cool thing. There was actually a Church of Sun Ra in Connecticut, bordering on what you normal people might call a cult. Probably. I was not involved in it, but I was playing music at the time in a band, and we were doing some Sun Ra covers. We opened up for the Arkestra, had the great blessing to open up for the Arkestra in '95, directed by Marshall Allen. And these individuals brought me their own photocopied version of the immeasurable equation. Don't know what the source of it is, but yeah, photocopied, hand colored. And that's probably the first bits of immeasurable equation I had around 1995 or so. But just came up and gave it to me, handed it to me. We love Sun Ra too. And they didn't ask me to join their church. If they had, I might have joined. Okay. 23 minutes. I'm going to try and keep this around half an hour. We've got a couple more for the bookshelf. So Sun Ra Research, I said that was a huge inspiration for me. So when I started doing my research, going to the library and photocopying record reviews and stuff like that, I took a cue from them. So I went to school for fine arts and studio arts. And by the time I got my degree, which was many years later, that had transitioned to graphic design. So I was a designer. I ended up being employed as a designer. So I used my craft and my occupation and applied it to my Sun Ra research. So taking a cue from the Hines brothers, all of the research that I did, I would compile into these books. And this was the first one. So this is the concert poster for that 1995 Arkestra show I was telling you about that my band, Bliss Family Jive, that I was in, opened up. But so the Hines brothers, they had all of their photocopies and stuff, and I was collecting my own, and I would collect them up in these stacks and put a cover on them and bind them. And that was like the first formal Sun Ra archives. what I called Sun Ra Archives. This was long, this was years before the Sun Ra LLC started using Sun Ra Archive, good 15, 20 years to my knowledge, but Arkive with a K, taking after the Arkestra. So this was January 1st, 2002. And this contains a lot of articles that are kind of like very famous at this point or well known, like the Rolling Stone Evidence CD reviews and the Gold Mine article by Robert Campbell. But then that version grew and grew and grew into 2 volumes that I gave the title "The Greatest Story Never Told," Volume 1 and Volume 2. So that original, it just the research kept growing and growing and growing, and this is the next form that they took. And what I started to do as a graphic designer is I started putting all these into originally PageMaker layout software, graphic design software. So this was April 23rd, 2002. So 8.5 by 11. And I started putting all of these things, all of the early articles that I found on the internet, started typesetting them and collecting them, putting some Sun Ra pictures in the background. So kind of the early interweb stuff, like when the Saturn handy catalogs were first put online. I can't remember who did that, but just then collecting, all of the paper, physical research, as well as preserving offline some of the early stuff from the internet, immeasurable equations as I came across them, press releases, Downbeat magazine reviews, my own scans of covers that I started to do, taking reference from Omniverse, photocopies of like the Sun Ra only parts of books that I had bought. So like the John Corbett book with the Alton Abraham interview, like I photocopied that for my own use so I could have it all in one Sun Ra volume. And that was like the next iteration of Sun Ra Archive. So this volume 1 and 2 were basically parts 1 and 2 that I did at the same time in April of 2002. It's just I couldn't fit them all in one bound. They didn't make a comb binding big enough to put in one huge biblical proportion. And when I did this, it was photocopies or laser prints, and I made 2 copies, one for myself and one for my friend Richard Segan. So that ended up being the basis for the 4 or 5 issues of Sun Ra Archive fanzine. Sun Ra Archive issue 1, December 2002. So I then took all of those pages or curated pages from those comb bound photocopy books and designed them into magazines. And each of the magazines that were distributed online as free PDFs through Suso Navarrette's Temple website had a theme. So issue 1 was a tribute to the maestro Marshall Allen. And I only had access to print these off in black and white. The PDFs that are online in color are in color, but these were never printed and distributed. I just made them available online for free and printed out a copy for myself. But this first issue was all about Marshall. So everything that I had at the time in print related to the maestro Marshall Allen, including a discography of his recordings that I put together that he made outside of the Sun Ra Orchestra. James Moody, Paul Bley, Marshall Allen Quartet, Terry Adams, etc. The earliest song that I'm aware of that Marshall filed with the Library of Congress called Margot from January 7th, 1947, courtesy of James Wolfe. Put that together. So that's the next form that Sun Ra Archive took. And I did, I think, 4 or 5 issues. December 2002 was the first one. So those books that I showed you, volumes 2, that was April. By December, I was putting out these digital issues. Always would have loved to have seen them printed, but I don't know the legal aspects of getting clearance for for reprinting articles. Wanted to give due respect to the original authors, but also I never wanted to be involved in anything that infringed on the Arkestra's business, had anything to do with money. Anything that I ever did, I donated to them and to the cosmos, which is why it was free. And this is cool. So happy arrival day, 5/22/06. This must have been the KCR, one of the KCR Sun Ra arrival day broadcasts. So I got Richard Segan, Charles Blass, Charlie Ellerby, Thomas Stanley. Yeah, that's where it was. Tyrone Hill to autograph it. I was too embarrassed or didn't want to be uncool or bother the guys and ask them all for their autographs, so I never did. But I'm glad I got Tyrone's here. This was when they did the in-studio performance for that WKCR broadcast. So did 4 or 5 issues, and I only have 3 of them printed out. So that's the next thing in the Sun Ra bookshelf for today. And then the last thing is this copy paper box. This is going to go on the shelf too, and this will be the last thing I show you today. And this is the photocopies of the scores from the Library of Congress that were disseminated by James L. Wolfe on the Saturn listserv group in the 90s, I think. Originally, when I was not a part of the original distribution, they were originally distributed as 11/17 tabloid size photocopies, and I was able to copy a copy from a friend who had gotten it, and I shrunk them down to 8.5/11 to be able to manage the size, and then get them on a flatbed scanner. And at the time, the biggest scanner, well, scanners were incredibly expensive, but an 11/17 scanner was prohibitively expensive. So I copied them at 8.5/11 so I could then take these photocopies, scan them into digital photo files, and retouch and sharpen the contrast, etc. on these. But so this is the box of the scores. Future, composed by the Sun Ra, July 17th, 1956, filed with the Library of Congress. So that's the last thing I'm going to show you today. It's going to go on the Sun Ra bookshelf. This is all the big and oversized stuff. And just to give you a sense of the work that James did and what a great service for the Sun Ra community, and the amount of work and selflessness that he put into this. These are the scores, and they run from January 7th, 1947, which is Margot by Marshall Allen. December 2nd, 1936. Alone with Just a Memory of You. Music by Sonny Blunt. Words by McKellen's Henry. 1936. Herman Blunt. It's just magic right there. 3 pages of a lead sheet. My Sweet, composed by Herman, quote, unquote, Poole, Poole, Blunt. Filed with the Library of Congress, the LOC, June 3rd, 1940. Just, so amazing. And then these go through to some Pat Patrick. May 21st, 1956 or 58, Chicago in Springtime or Springtime in Chicago. Music by the Sun Ra. The one before that is a Pat Patrick tune. Laura Dean Patrick, 1956, October 29th. Down Pat. So that's the next thing that's going to go on the Sun Ra bookshelf. And we'll close it out for today. And as I round up the next shelf and stack, we'll do another Sun Ra Books stream. Have a good night.